And now we'll go down to item 1, which is the two-year financial plan for fiscal years 2022 and 2023, and including the fiscal year 2022 recommended budget. So I'll turn that over to Mr. DeMartini.
Great, thank you very much, Chair Friedman, committee members. My name is Keith DeMartini, and I'm the city's finance director. And it is my pleasure to present a very high-level overview of the city's fiscal year 2022-2023 recommended budget. And the purpose of today's meeting, you can go to the next slide, please, is just to provide a very, very high-level overview of the budget document, which will be published on the city's website and be made available this afternoon at 2 o'clock at the same time that the city council meeting begins. I'll provide a very high-level overview of the document itself and what will be included in it. We'll also provide a listing of all of the budget review meetings that are scheduled to occur over the next 2 months, both with the Finance Committee and with the City Council. So it's very clear to you and also to the public about when the budget discussions will be occurring. And then the direction that staff would like to get from the Finance Committee this afternoon is to just understand and listen in regards to any additional topics that you would like to be discussed during the budget process. And then staff will do what we can to accommodate all of those requests. So that's the purpose of today's session with the Finance Committee. We go to the next slide, please. So I'd like to first just start with a very brief high-level overview of the budget document itself. Next slide, please. So the city charter actually dictates the process and the timeline for the budget development process, and the timeline and schedule for review with the Finance Committee, and in particular the City Council. Pursuant to the city charter, the city's budget from the city administrator must be submitted no later than 60 days prior to July 1st, which is the beginning of the fiscal year. And so April 20th is the date this year, which we will be submitting the budget to the City Council and make it available to the public for the public's review and examination. During the months of May and June is when the Council will listen to a number of budget presentations from department staff in regards to revenues and expenditures and projects and capital and staffing and a number of other components that make up the overall budget. And then also take public comment in regards to the proposed budget. And that budget will take effect on July 1st. Just a reminder that the city does implement a 2-year budget process, a 2-year financial plan. So the budget document that will be before you this cycle represents the first year of the 2-year plan for fiscal year 2022 and 2023. Next slide, please. The budget document itself, the budget book, is a big document. It's a lengthy document with a great deal of information that staff feels and has determined to be relevant and informative for the City Council to take and understand and read and ask questions to make the most informed decisions possible with the city's limited resources. The beginning of the document starts with a pretty extensive budget message from the city administrator that outlines some of the major trends and considerations and assumptions that have been built into the recommended budget from the city administrator. It also lists a number of priority projects that the City Council has told city staff that should be the priorities in the upcoming fiscal years. There are a number of summary schedules at the beginning of the front of the document, which provide updated information and projections in regards to revenues and expenditures by department, by major fund, a number of schedules in regards to our city staffing levels. And then there are a number of sections where it details each department's operating and capital budgets, and a great deal of information about a number of the priority projects and performance metrics that are used to evaluate the delivery of the services that staff provide. So you can look forward to reading all of that information in the budget book that will be posted online today at 2 o'clock. Again, there's a 2-year plan by department detailing out those revenues and expenditures and performance metrics. Next slide, please. The book itself goes into a great deal of information about the city's general fund, which is the largest fund. It's the most discretionary fund which is used to fund a number of the services that the city is able to provide to the public. On this slide, it shows all of the departments that are either primarily or completely funded by the city's general fund, ranging from library and the fire department all the way down to city attorney and public works. The book itself and the presentations that will be forthcoming today at the city council meeting, and then also in future finance committee and city council meetings, staff will review in a great amount of detail, revenue considerations, expense pressures. We'll talk about the reserves in the general fund, which there are significant impacts to the city's reserves, as we've been talking about throughout this fiscal year. We'll talk about a number of capital projects for ensuring that the city's infrastructure continues to be maintained and invested in. We'll talk about a number of projects that are allocated funding in the upcoming 2 fiscal years that staff has determined to be a priority based on city council's directions. The city's budget continues to be impacted by COVID. COVID has been a substantial impact, economic impact to the city at large and the greater area. But on the city's budget specifically, we have seen significant impacts on a number of our general fund revenue sources and departmental revenue sources in particular that have substantially changed the way that our budget projections are looking. So we will go into a great deal of detail to explain that to the Finance Committee and the City Council. There are a number of fee changes that are being proposed, most of which are just presented to you for your consideration to ensure that we are achieving cost recovery. Really, it's prudent for us to continue to adjust our fees to ensure that we're recovering our costs. And so the Finance Committee will hear those fee changes as well. As I mentioned earlier, departments will present a number of their priority projects to you as well. And in order to balance the budget this year, this is something that we talked about with the City Council in February during the budget retreat, the budget work session. We talked about expenditure reductions that were required in the fiscal year 2022 recommended budget in order to balance. The proposed budget that is before you does include just a little over $6 million of expenditure reductions, similar to expenditure reductions that were required to balance the current fiscal year budget, so that we can maintain some fiscal stability. And so we will go into some detail about what those reductions are and what some of the service level impacts might be. On the right-hand side, I talked about a number of the major considerations that were included with developing the general fund budget overall, so you can see those here. Sort of in summary, it was another difficult year, another difficult, challenging year in preparing the city's budget. I continue to be incredibly impressed with the staff that have been working on the budget. And staff has done a very thorough and comprehensive job in developing this budget and bringing it before you today. And so we're looking forward to discussing it with you. Next slide, please. The budget book will also go into some detail in regards to the number of enterprise funds that we have. You can see those on the left-hand side, and a number of internal service funds that the city has. Those are the funds that service and support the enterprise and the general fund departments. And similar to the general fund, those departments will present all the considerations and assumptions that were built into their proposed budgets. And you can see all those here in the center. Again, the same impacts on COVID. And there are some new projects and new programs being presented in the proposed budget that staff will present as well. We'll go on to the next slide, please. So now I wanted to go through the detailed budget review calendar with the Finance Committee so that everyone is aware of when we will be engaging with you and delivering presentations and then asking for your sort of review and feedback. Next slide, please. So the budget process in regards to presenting with council and the Finance Committee and starting to listen to the public begins today. Today is the day that the city will issue its proposed budget for fiscal year 22 and 2020 and 23. Today we'll be gathering the Finance Committee's feedback on any additional topics that you wish to hear during this budget cycle. This afternoon during the City Council meeting, staff will be delivering a very high-level overview presentation primarily of the city's general fund recommended budget. And then we'll be asking the city council to approve of the budget review schedule, which is this schedule right here. The items denoted in red are the times where staff will be delivering presentations to the Finance Committee specifically. And so you can see on April 27th, that's next Tuesday, staff will be going through the general fund tax and non-departmental revenue projections in the proposed budget. We'll be going through that in quite some detail with you next Tuesday. And then on May 4th, we'll be coming back to the Finance Committee where the general fund departments will be presenting any proposed fee changes to you. Next slide, please. On May 11th, the Finance Committee will meet again, where staff from the enterprise funds will present any proposed fee changes to you during that meeting. Next slide, please. The Finance Committee will meet again on May 18th, and that's where staff will be prepared to recommend any adjustments or changes to the recommended budget based on presentations that we have already had and feedback that we've already received from you. And then the committee will have an opportunity to make some decisions and make some recommendations to the city council in regards to the recommended budget. And that will be the last time where the Finance Committee is scheduled to meet. And as you can see, the city council will continue to meet through the middle and end of May. And then in the next slide, please, you'll see that the city council will receive the Finance Committee's budget recommendations on the meetings scheduled for June 9th. In the evening, so that there can be greater public participation during that meeting. And then the City Council is scheduled to formally adopt the recommended budget on June 22nd at the regular City Council meeting. Next slide, please. If you can go back a slide, please, Ms. Nickerson. The recommendations for today's presentation with the Finance Committee is to receive the recommended 2-year financial plan for fiscal years 2022 and 2023, including the recommended operating and capital budget for fiscal year 2023. And that the Finance Committee, if you would be able to provide staff with any additional topics that the committee wishes to include in your review, and then staff will be able to take that feedback and see if we can include that in future presentations before you. And before I open it up to questions and discussion, I just want to take an opportunity to thank the dozens and dozens of staff across all the city departments that have worked very, very hard and diligently over the past few months in preparing this budget that is before you today. A great deal of time and effort went into it, a great deal, and another challenging budget cycle. And in particular, I'd like to recognize Brandon Boudet and Chase Evans in the budget team that have spent many, many hours preparing this document that was presented to you today. So I just want to make sure that we acknowledge many of the staff that have worked on this document. And that concludes my presentation. We'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. DiMartini. And again, goes without saying, thank you to our staff and everyone who put so much work into this. The budget is a huge undertaking, and also, especially when it's the 2-year budget, it's even greater. So Mr. DiMartini, if I could have you come on, I have a question, then I'll open up to my colleagues if they have any questions. But I'm just looking at the schedule for the finance, and I just noted it's at 12:30, and on one of them it goes to 1:45. And I know in years past, there's been a lot of discussion. Sometimes there isn't, sometimes there isn't. Would we be able to maybe make it at 12? Do you think, would there be a need to do 12, or do you think 12:30 gives us enough time to get through each of these items? I just don't want to shortchange ourselves, being that we run up against the council meeting with only an hour and 15 minutes.
Councilmember Freeman, thank you for bringing that up. Staff did look at each of the agenda items and the content that is planned to be delivered in each of those presentations. 12:30 might be a little tight on some of them. We think it will work, but we would be happy to have those meetings start at 12 o'clock if it gives the committee adequate time. We would be happy to start at 12 o'clock if you would choose to do so.
Okay, I just don't want to shortchange you presentations or questions. So I'll ask my colleagues if you have questions now, and if you could say if you'd rather prefer 12 or 12:30 is the start time. So I'd like to hear from that and any other questions you might have. Councilmember Gutierrez.
I would also like to start at 12, please.
Thank you. And Councilmember Harmon.
Thank you, Chair Friedman. No questions, but I agree. I think 12 would be great. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I'm not hearing any questions. So Mr. DiMartini, we'll start at 12. It just gives us more so we can really vet these issues. I think given this year, the challenge we're facing, that extra half hour will allow us to have that extra time to really go into the challenging budget we have. So make that change. So I will open it up to public comment on this item. And is there any member of the public who wishes to speak? I don't see any on the list, so I'll close public comment. And now we need to actually approve the recommendation. So is there a motion on the floor?
So moved.
So Councilmember Harmon moved the staff recommendation. Is there a second?
I second.
And Councilmember Gutierrez has the second. So can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, for the motion, the recommendation to receive the recommended 2-year financial plan for fiscal years 2022 and 2023. And then also for the committee to provide staff with any additional topics that the committee wishes to include in their review. The motion was given by Councilmember Harmon and then seconded by Councilmember Gutierrez. We'll do a roll call. We'll start with Councilmember Harmon, please.
Yes.
Councilmember Gutierrez,
Yes.
and then Committee Chair Friedman.
Yes. Okay.
Motion passes unanimously.
Great, thank you. And with that, and we'll be starting those meetings at 12. So we'll make that and we'll go on to the next item.